About 6 months ago, Governor John Carney, along with his partner in crime, Department of Education's Chief of Diversity, Jim Simmons, stopped by to talk about the Wilmington Learning Collaborative and what it would mean for the schools here in the city of Wilmington. Today, they are back. After 200 hours, meetings of work, they are here to tell and share the progress of the WLC and their plans for the 2023 and 2024 school year. Gentlemen, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back.
Great to be back. Thanks, Owen, for having us.
Thanks for having us.
It's been 6 months. What has changed? You guys put in two, I saw Governor knocking on the doors and all that great stuff. Saw you along with him. 200 hours later, where are we?
So Jim and our team have been out on the streets knocking doors, as you've said. I think the two things most important that we've done is the door knocking, because we talk directly to parents, grandparents, even children that are in the schools to hear what they think about the quality of the schools in their neighborhood. We've done every neighborhood in the city. So getting that feedback from the parents directly. A lot of the children, their children don't go to the school that might be right down the street. Why is that the case? Where do they go? What do we need to do to attract them to the neighborhood school, a couple blocks away? And the second thing I think is we've had some incredible kind of town hall meetings with educators and teachers. One in particular that comes to mind is with the teachers at Warner Elementary, just a block and a half from where I live on 18th Street, 19th Street on the north end. And we just really heard from them, their frustrations, the things that they encounter in the classrooms, and how we as in the school districts and those who support the teachers need to do better and get more resources for their children. I know Jim probably has a different view, but those are the two things that stuck out in my mind. I'm a political leader, so I need to hear from the people that I work for and the people that I represent. And that's what we've been hearing. I think it's been critical for our ability to convince school board members to join and sign the agreement that's now before them.
Now, what has that been like, trying to convince them?
Yeah, pretty good. They're a little bit hesitant.
Okay.
I think as they should be. Some of them, like parents, have said, well, we've been down this road before with this great idea or that great idea that never panned out. And I think the biggest challenge for us, when I say us globally, those of us who are elected officials, myself as governor and the state reps and senators from these districts, the mayor and his council, school boards and school leaders, is to earn the trust of parents. And once we do that, I think things get to be a little bit easier to make progress where we need to make progress.
And that's one of the biggest things that I'm seeing right now is that the past comes back up to haunt, just like it did with the vaccine. And now we're talking about education. Especially in the Black and brown communities, people are scared of what happened before, the promises that were made before. What is going to be different, Governor Jim, now from the approach to execution of this? Because it sounds like it's a great idea, a great plan, but how do you win over the skeptics?
Yeah, if I may, I think the governor started to touch on it. The trust piece around, yet again, here is something else. And what I find, the struggle is that they didn't like the approach of here's what we're going to present for you to do, but yet they don't trust the fact that we're coming to you and saying, let's build something together, right? And so trying to do something different and trying to get them to understand, the governor and I have both said in different ways, the devil's in the details. And what we're suggesting is let's work on those details together. The way I look at it is if we give you a plan and it doesn't work, you can blame us for it not working. But if we build it together, I think it's a better chance that we're going to work together to fix it and make sure that it works.
So to your point about what's different, instead of the fragmentation of 3 districts and a little bit with Colonial, it's going to be one collaborative, those 3 districts working together. And I think Jim talks about it a lot. It's a question of capacity, right? The district boards currently, they have obligations in schools outside of the city. This will give a hyper focus to the children and families and the challenges that they face here in the city.
All right, okay. In these meetings that you do, over these 200 meetings that you've been in, what are some of the suggestions or advice that you heard that were alarming to you?
One is, I think, burnout. among teachers,
Okay.
and we see that in the tenure of teachers who come and work in the city. We have great committed teachers that come, they work at Bancroft or Warner or whatever the school is, and then after 3 or 4 years, they get tired because they don't have the support that they need, and they'll take whatever opportunity it is to move to a school out in the suburban areas. We saw that in particular. I met with a group of teachers at McVeigh, I think it was, out in the greater Newark area. There were probably 15 teachers there, most of whom had started their careers in the city. But after 4 or 5 years, they decided to move to a different environment. We need to attract the best teachers that we can and educators there, and then keep them. Part of that is supporting them with additional resources for kind of social emotional supports and other kinds of, in some ways, non-academic related services, but services that are necessary so that your children can learn.
We were, you hit on it, because my next question, my follow-up was going to be the shortages. And we understand, like you said, they're starting in the inner city and they're moving out. Let's dip over to the draft agreement. What is the draft? For the people that's probably just tuning in or probably just hearing for this for maybe the first or second time, let's talk about the draft agreement. What is the draft agreement?
So the key of it is local governance, right? So teacher, leader, teams at the schools, community councils with individual schools that feed into a Wilmington collaborative council, if you will, focus exclusively on those Wilmington schools and the children. So sharing the responsibility with the school districts. The school district superintendents and one of their board members, the city board members, are represented on that council.
Okay.
But fundamentally, it's intended to be a bottom-up strategy with lots of governance authority at the local level.
Do you think that bottom-up is going to work, Governor?
I think it is an opportunity to earn the trust that we keep talking about, right? And it has to start with trust.
Right.
And it has to start with engagement. We've learned so much just over the last year with the door knocking and with the town hall meetings. That's essential, I think, to moving the ball. Do we have to do other things that are different with additional resources? Absolutely.
Right.
Do we need experienced, knowledgeable educators to be part of that decision making? Absolutely. And it's a mix of both, the local community input, parent and teacher input, with the current members on the 3 school boards.
Now, with that being said, let's circle back. I want to talk about what are the key outlines, the key points in this draft agreement that you believe people should know?
So that governance structure that I just described, right? So there's 6 members representing each of the 3 school districts, so 2 each. Then there's another 6 that are selected from the community, parents from each district, teachers, educators that are retired, so that you're not, that you don't have conflicts there, with expertise, with some input from the mayor and city council in terms of the appointment there. So that'll be key. The appointments that are made for that council, and then for the local governing body, and then of course the councils, community councils, and the teacher leader teams is important as well.
Now, who makes those appointments?
Well, with respect to, the governor makes most of them.
Right.
The 6 from the districts are kind of ex officio, if you will. They are by virtue of their office, so the superintendents.
Okay.
And the Wilmington representative. I guess Red Clay needs to make a decision. They have 2 Wilmington representatives about which one will serve from that district. And then the other 6 are appointed, one with recommendations from the mayor and the city council.
Okay, nice.
So the idea that, everybody is the idea is to so that everybody has skin in the game and feels ownership.
That's what I was about to say.
Not just kind of outside of the tent shooting in, we're all in this together. That's the fundamental concept.
Okay, all right. Jim, off to you. Chief diversity guy, the guy that sees it all. What are you seeing that needs to be changed within the school?
Well, I think one is, I think that when you talked about the teacher retention and the support for teachers, I think also we've done district-wide, should we say, professional development. And I think that there's a different education that happens in an urban setting than that happens in a suburban setting. And so districts have been doing, as they should probably, done district-wide professional development to support teachers. But teachers in the city have a set of problems that their suburban counterparts don't have.
Right.
So I think that's a big, big piece. And I think that can help with the burnout that the governor spoke about. I think it can help with the retention piece. I think that the leaders in the city, the principals that they need a different level of support in terms of running an urban building versus running a suburban building. It looks much different. And then the family engagement looks much different in an urban environment. So, but to do things the same for all of those schools and expect that you're going to get the same outcome.
When you say looks much different, I'm with you 100%. When you say it looks much different, paint that picture for me. What's different from a school here at Bancroft or versus a school down in Middletown?
It looks much different in terms of what they're dealing with on a nightly basis. What does their home environment look like? How are they raised? You know, like even when you think about around racial lines, there's differences in the way people respond. And if you don't understand those responses, those biases that we all have start to play into decision makings on how we treat people and how we educate folks. And so I think we've got to be cognizant of those biases and understand them as well. I think it has to look a lot different in terms of people need to see someone who looks like them in their educational growth, right? Like you can't be it if you can't see it. And so we've got to use this opportunity to try to provide more staff and administrators that look like the kids and the population in which they serve.
Right. Because I was looking at, so let's take CEB, for example, right? Community Education Building. Right. And what they're doing with the kids in Coomba, Great Oaks, and I can't remember the other school there. Like a lot of it, and after talking to them, a lot of the problems when it comes to the kids that look like me is home, right? Some of these kids don't eat in the morning because the food is not available. Like they depend on the CEB to help them, you know, just eating and sleeping and things like that. So it's hard for kids like us, for kids that look like me, to go to school and we're being asked to learn, but we're hungry and our tensions. And a lot of kids are suffering from PTSD. So
you have a lot of that, but as Jim was saying, you can't paint with a broad brush that all the students are coming from similar environments.
Right.
In fact, we see as we knock on the doors, some of the parents say, I don't want to send my child to that school because of some of those problems and distractions, if you will. So I'm going to send them to this or that charter school. Right. And what that does is create greater fragmentation. It's a good thing at one level, but also a challenging thing because it creates fragmentation in neighborhoods. You could go to every other door and the children are going to different schools. They're making those choices based on their perception about what the other students or families are going to be like who are there, and whether they're going to get a better education. So what we need to do, in my view, and one of the reasons people say, well, you're building a new school at Bancroft. Well, it's not just a building, but in some ways, the building is the signal of our commitment to these children and these families. And it also is, I think, a magnet to parents to say, hey, let's try Bancroft out again. We're just around the corner, right down the street. Same kinds of investments, not with a new school, but over on the west side with the Byard School with the construction that's ongoing now. Yeah. In Brandywine, the schools are pretty well capitalized in terms of Harlan, PS, and even investments that Red Clay has made into Lewis and Warner. Yeah,
I love what you just said, commitment to children, right? And my mother being a retired teacher, can you just tell people, remind people of the commitment coming out of your office for the children and teachers that's in Wilmington and say Delaware, period?
Well, this is purely symbolic. But when I go up and I knock on the door and the parent of the child in the house comes to the door and says, Governor Carney, like, what are you doing here? That shows that we care. If we build an $80 million new facility on the east side of Wilmington, first new facility in ages, people say, hey, you know, they care. It's symbolic things are meaningful, right? You have to follow. We have a commitment through what we call opportunity funding for additional resources for these schools and these children. The additional supports that are headed that way because of that funding. Those are the kind of commitments that I think build trust. But it starts with it's a show me type thing.
Right.
Yeah, don't just, in my old neighborhood we say, money talks, BS walks.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And
But outside the money, forget the money.
Right.
Why do you care so much?
because I care about these children. They're our children. We have to look at it that way. Their success and their family's success will mean the success of our city and our state ultimately.
Okay.
So it's all connected.
Right.
Right? They're not going to be successful.
Right.
Here's my biggest thing.
Right.
They need to be able to read proficiently by third grade, and too many of them can't.
And what
Because
happens?
if they can't learn after that,
Okay.
if they're not reading and retaining what they're reading, right? So they're going to continue to fall behind.
Right.
And we know the negative consequences of that.
Right.
So we got to start early. Investments in a preschool education, right?
Mm-hmm.
We converted the old Stubbs schools to an early childhood center and
Mm-hmm.
a parent support center. Two things that are core to our approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Supporting the whole family and also getting children off to a good start before kindergarten.
All right. So when does the real work start? Now you did pregame.
This is
you did pregame for 200
It's a little
hours.
scary. Jim and I are both football guys. You know, preseason is always rough.
Right.
You know?
Right. You already did preseason.
Yeah, but we got a lot of work ahead of us.
And to be clear, this is not an overnight fix.
No, it's got to be long term.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the hard work begins in July, and I'm going to be optimistic that once the boards vote to the agreement. And then that's when the hard work begins, because then we have to actually sit down and have, I don't know if it's going to be 200 meetings or more, but we got to start having those meetings at the building level with those councils and those teacher leader groups that the governor spoke about earlier to say, like, what is it that you need? And while we know that there are some commonalities amongst the schools within the city, there are also some things that are different. And so something at a Lewis is going to be much different than something that's needed at Bancroft. So we've got to be willing to say that these things are in common, let's address those, but what are those things that are different? On Tuesday at one of the meetings in my small group, we talked about students with disabilities. What looks different for students with disabilities in this model? And
Right.
how do we address that? And I said, I'm not here to answer that, because we need to hear that from the folks who are teaching those students, from the families, and so that we know what we're giving them is what they actually need versus making that assumption.
And that's been one of the hardest things, right?
Right.
Basically communicating to folks that this is a grassroots up kind of thing. We're not going to come in and say, here's how we have to do it, which is kind of the way Jim has a way of talking about doing two people.
You want me to clean that
Why
up
don't
for
you
you?
clean that up?
We spent a lot of time doing things.
If I'm going to quote you, you might as well quote the quote.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of times doing things to and for people and not with.
Okay.
And so we've got to reinvest time and energy into doing things with people.
And that's really important because it helps build the trust that's necessary to make progress and to strengthen it as you go along.
You said trust 3 times during this interview.
Well, because almost every door that we knocked on, it just came flowing out. You mentioned the history, the tortured history, segregation and desegregation, and busing and all the rest of it, and people are affected by that, right? Negatively, and so we've got to earn that trust. And look, that's not to say there are really good things happening in these schools, but we need to do better, kind of systemically.
Right. What can we do as a community to help the WLC?
Well, the most important thing next is to make it plain to the members of the school boards that this is an idea that we need to support.
How are they taking it, Governor? How are the school boards, the members of the school boards taking it? Are they with it or are they not?
So they were a little bit hands off a little bit initially, but many of them engaged. Don Patton, one of the board members at Christina, has been at almost all of our community meetings. Other board members the same. Others a little bit more skeptical. There's a big issue, I don't want to sugarcoat it, there's a big issue around shared decision making, right?
Right.
They have legal authorities on the school boards that come from the state code. And just getting comfort with that. My own view is once you get started, it's like, that's the way they make decisions now. they do it in a collaborative kind of way. And so I think that'll emerge with the folks that are involved in the collaborative. I know that each of the superintendents, they've been really good. Again, they don't want to get out in front of their boards because that's, the boards are the ones who have the legal authority there. I think they've been generally supportive, particularly recently. They've got great ideas. They're the experts to a certain extent. I think the challenge for them is the community engagement and to really embrace the ideas that have come up. Kind of to your point earlier, is this going to work? Do they know what they're talking about, kind of thing? I think it's a mix. It's leadership from educational experts, and it's embracing local sentiment.
Okay, all right. And before we let you go, you guys, I can't wait to talk to you in another 6 months because I want to hear again the progress and where we are and keep the community abreast of what's happening. But I want to talk about the Summer of Opportunity programs from the Department of Education. Can we hit on that a little bit? You guys,
sure.
Okay.
Well, let me just set the table by saying this. The last 2 years have been extraordinarily difficult for educators, teachers, parents, and students. And students haven't been in front of teachers in person nearly enough. And so there's been what is referred to as learning loss, Children aren't as far along as they need to be. The only way to address that is additional time, and summer is an opportunity for that. So we've been pushing hard, Department of Education, with the districts to provide more opportunities for children, particularly those who might be falling behind more. They're not reading at where they need to be. We've created a program to engage high school students to help with the various summer camps and summer institutes, that type of thing. So it's a real opportunity, and it has to carry over into the next year with after school programming, because the only way you can catch up is if you have extra time.
Yeah, that's true. And utilize that.
Because they'll be learning new stuff, right?
Yeah.
And for me, the key is getting students to read. If they, and that's hard during the summertime. I remember when I was a kid, I wouldn't be sitting in my house reading a book unless my mom told me I had to. I'd be out playing baseball or whatever the case may be, basketball. And so somehow we've got to provide that structure or that opportunity so that children can keep up with the reading.
All right.
So from the department, we're also checking in, and Dr. Hollick has asked me to oversee monitoring summer enrichment opportunities, but not only in the past, that's been traditionally academic. We're asking to include enrichment opportunities. I often tell the story about my son's a better than average baseball player, but he understood fractions because he understood 1 out of 3 in baseball was 33%, right? And so those enrichment opportunities support that learning, but we've also challenged them to say, let's make sure that those opportunities are going to those marginalized students who oftentimes in the past haven't had those opportunities. So I do about a 2-week check-in with I call them the big 3, Brandywine, Red Clay, and Christina, to see like what are their registrations look like, and then what is the outreach for those students who haven't registered yet or not participating. But I don't exclude, like I talk to Jeff Menzer out of Colonial every 2 weeks to make sure what's happening in his district as well. So we're including everybody because there's students who live in the city who don't go to schools in the city.
Right.
So we want all students to be engaged. We've also met with our community-based programs to say, what are you doing? And then to say, keep track of where those students go to school,
right,
so that report can go back to their districts to say, like, Ivan wasn't in one of our programs, but he was involved in something at the POW Center.
Right.
So then we know that he's engaged somewhere. So just trying to make sure that everybody gets opportunities.
Jim made a reference there that's an important one, which is particularly in the Brandywine School District, you have a lot of city students who don't go to Harlan or to PS. They go out to maybe Claymont or Lombardi or whatever, Carcroft, whatever that elementary school is. And so we need to think about those in the context of this collaborative as well. And then you have Lewis in Red Clay, that's a dual language school and really doing some really good things. So we don't want to eliminate those things that are important. I think the biggest challenge might be on the Brandywine side, right? Because there is that incentive for getting diverse populations in some of those suburban elementary schools as well. And then, of course, Brandywine has the PS DuPont
Gifted program.
gifted program at PS DuPont, which is a strong program as well.
All right, it sounds like there's a lot going on to bring these kids back up to speed with everything.
Oh yeah, the summer has to be. You know?
It has to be. There's no question. We were, 2 summers down?
Yeah, I mean, and the biggest challenge there is to keep track of the ones that need it the most, right?
Right.
It tends to be, you offer opportunities like that, and the children who are doing well, they feel good about themselves, they want to do more of it, right? Those that aren't doing as well, sometimes it's harder to get them connected with. We used to, back when Storman's Classic was at its height, we had a reading program that was part of it in the 12 to 14 group that I coached in, and some of the kids, just breezed right through it.
Right.
And others that needed it more were a little bit, they didn't want to participate.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of older, age group, just on the verge of going to high school. So those guys were like maybe 7th, 8th, 9th graders. So they're right on that bubble there.
Yeah.
But it was instructive as to who was most engaged, and the ones that were most engaged were the ones that were the best in the academic area.
Yeah. I love it. All right, look, this is your camera right here, Governor and Jim. Look at it. Tell the community what you want them to know about the WLC.
WLC, we think, is our best opportunity to provide better education for the children in our city. Our children can't be successful, their families can't be successful, City of Wilmington can't be successful, and ultimately the state of Delaware can't be successful if we don't do better by these children. We believe that everybody has a good intentions in terms of this education, but we need to do better. And the WLC will do that.
I would focus on the word collaborative. We've spent a lot of time in education working in silos in terms of our districts. I think this gives us an opportunity for those districts to come together, include their families, include the teachers. So the collaborative piece of it hasn't been done before, and I think this is a great opportunity to do so.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you taking time out your day. See you in 6 months, 3 months? When the next time we'll see you? We need updates.
I was hoping I'd get invited back in to talk sports, but
no, you got that. Well, I think M said once a quarter. Is it once a quarter? Once a quarter, Gov can come back.
I had so much fun when we were talking NBA playoffs, and I'd like to come back.
Did those guys blow your mind?
Oh, they were unbelievable, yeah.
You'll definitely be back. We got you. We make sure we got you now. But I definitely want to make sure that we keep the community in the loop, especially when it comes to education, the students, and these teachers.
Yeah,
so,
and you guys can help with getting the information out as we move along, because this is really just the end of the beginning. We hope,
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of work to do after this.
Governor John Carney, thank you so much. Jim Simmons, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And can you make sure you keep us up to date with whatever's going on?
Absolutely. We'll be back.
All right, awesome. We're here to help, here to share. And for you at home that's watching or on your cell phones or your iPads, feel free to drop a comment in below. I'll make sure that the governor and Jim gets it, receives it, so they can answer any question that you have about the WLC. So for more information, go to DETVCH.com and follow us. And Governor, real quick, can you tell them where the website to go to for WLC?
WLC.gov. You can find all the information out. We got all kinds of information on there.
All right, there you go. Open Gov, gotta love it. We'll see you on the other side, DETV.